So in this segment, we're going to be discussing the kind of Sunak bot malfunctioning, where he gives two identical answers to two very different questions, two fairly different questions. And Ian Wells, she works for the BBC. She's pretty good. She's a really good investigative journalist, but in this case, no investigation needed to find a fraud. And I think this is kind of Sunak GPT just malfunctioning here. Honestly, I know a lot of people make the AI joke, but sometimes it really feels true.
On immigration, will you apologise for breaking your manifesto pledge to cut immigration?
I'm very clear that the levels of migration are too high and they've got to come down to more sustainable levels. I've been clear about that. It's good to see that the ONS yesterday did say that the levels of migration are now slowing, in their words, which is a welcome step, but we've got more to go. And that's why I announced a policy earlier to clamp down on the number of dependents that students can bring when they're coming here, where we...
And on his point about things like dependents, like it's going to make the UK a less attractive place to come to, in my opinion, because all it means is if you have a kid, most likely you're not going to want to come to the UK. Or if you have a family member who is dependent on you, you're not going to want them to the UK because the UK won't allow it. So all it means is for people who are postgraduates or other people, kind of older students looking to study here, they're not going to come here. Because why would you go to a place where you're not allowed to bring your children? And it's not just that goes for students, goes for workers as well. If you lower the amount of dependents that can come here, because a dependent isn't just your children or your parents, it could be your significant other as well. And so if Sunak lowers the amount of dependents that can come here, if you're, say, a healthcare worker, which someone we desperately need, or a teacher, or any profession that the UK is short on, you might not be able to get a work visa here because you're married to someone, or you're dating someone long term, or you have a child or a parent who needs your care. So this policy, completely stupid, especially when we have low unemployment and we have a labour force shortage.
We've seen a very significant rise in that. That action that I took represents the single toughest measure that anyone has taken to bring down the levels of legal migration in a very long time. So that should give people a sense of my commitment.
I mean, to be fair, we're seeing the highest levels of legal migration we've seen in a long time. So for him to make this argument doesn't really make sense.
To bringing migration down, and if we see further abuse of the system, of course we're prepared to act and do more.
There's no abuse of the system. We have a points-based system. If you have enough points to come here, then you can apply for a work visa. There is no abuse of the system happening here.
Reports the Immigration Minister this morning wants to double the salary cap for a work visa and cap the number of NHS workers. Do you support those ideas? And who's going to work in the NHS if you can't hire the staff from overseas?
So you got to note the question here, because his answer is completely stupid. But they're going to make it more difficult for overseas workers to come here, especially in the NHS. Well, not especially in the NHS, but it's going to impact the NHS a lot, because healthcare workers in this country don't get paid a lot. Nurses, I think they make around starting salary is about 20 grand, and I don't think it goes up a ton from there, depending on what band you're in, because that's typically how it's done. So Sunak's answer, you would think, would address the NHS specifically.
Well, I'm clear that the overall level of net migration is simply too high, and it's got to come down to more sustainable levels. The ONS have said that migration is now already slowing.
No one's talking about the overall level of migration, not really, but he's mentioned the ONS again.
So that is encouraging, but there's more to do, for sure, and that's why I've already taken action together with ministers, which is to clamp down on the number of dependents that students can bring when they come here, because we saw a very significant rise in those numbers.
So he's talking about students in the context of the question being about the NHS, which makes absolutely no sense, and he's talking about dependents again, which in the context of the question makes no sense.
Due to take force, it will make a big difference, but of course, if there are other areas where there's abuse happening, we're going to look...
And I had to check, because based on her comment, she says Sunak gives near identical answers when asked about a question on a broken manifesto commitment to cut immigration and who are working in the NHS. So this is, unless she stitched me up here, which I doubt she would have done, I don't get how you can give the same answer to two questions, two very different questions.
Look at that, and we will clamp down on it. Thank you very much.
It just doesn't make sense, and it's just so robotic. It's just, this is what I mean when it comes to politicians and people who have had way too much media training, is they will default to certain answers and they can't answer questions dynamically. We see, I think the same problem is, Starmer has a similar problem, but he's not as bad as this. But then again, he's not under as much pressure as Sunak is now. But this is just so embarrassing. Who's going to work in the NHS? Well, we're cutting the levels of migration because they're way too high, and the ONS has said it's slowed down, and we're getting rid of dependents. Is like, what? what is going on here, honestly? So yeah, it's just an embarrassing answer from Sunak. I know this video is a bit old and I've covered it in a live stream before, just like a lot of the content I do, but I did want to kind of show you that I think this is where Sunak might come undone, similar to Theresa May, is when he does interviews and things like that when it comes close to the election, and they look at this sort of stuff, because he will keep doing this. And it just kind of raised the question, what is Sunak's team doing? Like, Liz Truss's team tried really hard to kind of alter her voice and her mannerisms a bit, but it didn't work. What is Sunak's team doing to kind of media train him? Because this is really bad here, people. And obviously, I want him to crash and burn, but, when you're a politician, like, you have a lot of access to a lot of resources and a lot of people. It's, what are you doing? Like, this is a guy who didn't know how to pay to get a can of Coke, didn't know how to fill up a petrol or diesel or whatever it was for a car. Like, this is just, he's so embarrassing, honestly. I don't get how, well, I know how you can get this far in life, but it beggars belief that the kind of level of politicians we have in this country just so low that this man could give two bogus answers to two different questions. And I feel like the journalist should have interrupted him there, really. I think it's a bit kind of crappy journalism, but we move. I thought it's a bit more of a fun clip to kind of talk about, because we don't really have a lot of fun on the channel anymore. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed kind of Sunak bot GPT or whatever malfunctioning. Hopefully the next update kind of patches these kind of mistakes, because it's a bit embarrassing having a prime minister who can't answer two basic questions. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, support the channel on Patreon, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.